Welcome back to The New Life, A Better Way to Health, Part 3. This seminar is not meant to replace medical advice. It is not intended to provide personalized medical advice in any way. Now, the material presented in this seminar is for general educational and informational purposes only. An official welcome back to each of you for our next session of Going from Sickness to Health, learning the 10 principles of the new life. I am so excited to share our next principle, also free by the way. This session presents the principle Enjoy Sunshine. Take in the therapeutic benefits from that flaming ball of fire in the sky. It is unfortunate that the sun has gotten such a bad rap. We hope to change this bad rap that the sun has gotten and see it as a friend from which we receive health and life. So let's jump right in with this video clip that gives us an overview of the health benefits of enjoying the sun, but also shares the dangers of not getting enough of it.
How does sunlight, or lack of it, affect your health? Vitamin D, also known as the sunshine vitamin, comes from exposure to sunlight. When the sun's UVB rays hit the skin, a reaction takes place that enables skin cells to create vitamin D.
Vitamin D is related to many different things in health, not only bone health, but also musculoskeletal, also the ability to fight infections, to cancers, and a whole bunch of other medical conditions.
So being starved of sunlight can be detrimental to the human body.
Well, somebody who has very low vitamin D levels, who is not on vitamin D supplements, can have problems with bone formation. So it's how the bone forms with calcium and vitamin D, and that can lead to a condition called osteomalacia. It can also lead to increased fractures.
The Institute of Medicine recommends that the average adult get 600 to 800 units of vitamin D a day. And while severe vitamin D deficiency isn't common for most adults, supplements can help when needed.
There's vitamin D2 and there's vitamin D3, and both are effective at restoring the body's stores of vitamin D.
But too much vitamin D can hurt too.
And people who are on mega doses of supplements, for example, 100,000 units a day, can get vitamin D toxic. And the only way to know that is they'll get high calcium levels. So they'll get symptoms associated with high calciums, which could be things like confusion, abdominal pain, kidney stones, things like that.
And a number of studies are underway to investigate all of the health benefits associated with vitamin D.
Before watching the video, don't forget to subscribe to our channel by clicking the subscribe button below and clicking the bell icon to be notified whenever we publish a new video. Spending some time in the sun is a great way to raise your energy levels, don't you think? But did you know that natural sunlight has innumerable health benefits, both physically and emotionally? Today, we're going to give you the top 5 reasons why you should spend more time in the sun during your day-to-day life. 1. Natural sunlight improves productivity and lifts your mood. You've probably already heard that depression can happen during long periods of bad weather. But have you thought that maybe spending time in the sun is a sort of antidepressant? Being exposed to natural light improves your productivity and gives you more energy to finish your daily chores. 2. Regulates your circadian rhythm. The longer we stay inside, the more messed up our circadian rhythm, internal clock gets. This is due to the fact that artificial light affects melatonin production, which is responsible for our body's sleep schedule. Do you think that your internal clock is irregular? Take a week off work to enjoy the sun. If you can't take a week off, at least take advantage of the windows in your home in order to improve your sleep. 3. More natural light, less electric energy. The more natural light your house is exposed to, the less electricity you'll need to light it and the less money you'll spend on electricity. 4. It improves eyesight. Think twice before putting on your sunglasses when leaving the house. Recent studies show that natural light is good for your eyes, while artificial light from the TV, our cell phones, and computers can harm our eyesight. There are studies that show that people who work at night without sun exposure are more susceptible to different types of cancer and other diseases. 5. It improves sleep quality. Have you heard about the negative effects of the blue light emitted by your smartphone at night? Artificial lights interrupt our body's melatonin production, affecting our ability to fall asleep. People who use artificial illumination at night normally sleep worse. Being in contact with natural light throughout the day will give you energy during the day and make it easier for you to fall asleep at night. With all of these benefits, it should be easier for you to understand why you should expose yourself to natural light more often, be it at home or at work. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. For more recipes and tips, subscribe to the channel.
What causes sickness and disease, and what does sunshine have to do with it? As we consider the principle of sunshine, most people are very afraid of the sun, using copious amounts of sunscreen or avoiding the sun altogether. And we must acknowledge that too much sun is harmful, so we must be judicious. But would you have ever imagined that not getting sun exposure can be detrimental to your health also? Sickness and disease are an effort of nature to free the system from conditions that result from a violation of the laws of health. Sun exposure causes a chain reaction that converts cholesterol into vitamin D. There is an inverse relationship between cortisol, your fight or flight hormone, and vitamin D. Both are hormones. When we are stressed or cortisol level is high, serum vitamin D levels are low. It is important to get an adequate supply of sun exposure each day in order to maintain optimal vitamin D levels. So in the event we become stressed, our levels do not drop below what our body needs for optimal healthy function. How about that? Both vitamin D and cortisol are hormones, and when we are stressed, serum vitamin D levels are low. Do you see how the principles are connected? This presentation will share a great deal on the subject of vitamin D and how necessary it is to our health. But pay strict attention to how the principles work together, even as it relates to exercise later on. Exposure needed to generate sufficient vitamin D may vary depending on skin color. Darker skin needs more sun due to melanin, a dark brown-black pigment. Now, daily sun exposure lowers blood pressure. Healthy vitamin D levels are linked to lower blood glucose levels. Via vitamin D production, sunshine helps lower cholesterol. Vitamin D deficiency is linked with risk of cardiovascular disease. There is a causal relationship between obesity and vitamin D status deficiency. We saw from the video earlier that vitamin D is produced when the sunlight hits our skin. But is the sun the best source for vitamin D? Point number 1. What is the best source of vitamin D? The sun. The sun is the best source. Let's take a look at our video from Good Morning America with Dr. Oz and see if medical science agrees, while we learn about a few other sources of vitamin D.
How many of you know what your vitamin D level is?
Put your hands up.
Look at that.
All right, now, here's the second question. How many of you think the best way of getting vitamin D is through milk or dairy products? Put up that little card that shows milk and dairy. All right? Now, how many of you think that, in fact, it's through cod liver and fish and other sources like that? A couple of brave souls there. And how many think it's the sun? Put the sun up. All right. So I'll tell you what. I think actually most of you got it right, because I think it's the sun. So let me give you the numbers you want to aim for. And by the way, you don't know your vitamin D level unless you check it. So
and you check it by a blood test.
Simple to do, easy acceptable. Vitamin D is stored as something called 25 vitamin D. So you check that level, and your number one, it should be above 50. If it's between 30 and 50, you're not terribly deficient, but we usually try to supplement you. If you're below 30, you're way off the scale. Diane, what was your number?
15.
Always low. I would bet you that 60% of people who are watching this show right now, you can see my face, have deficient vitamin D levels. And if you're dark-skinned or you're overweight, I can almost guarantee you, unless you're taking some type of supplement, because you know,
overweight, why?
Because vitamin D is fat soluble. So the fat sucks it up, takes it out of the system.
Oh, I see.
And so for a lot of people, they don't recognize it. Let me show you a quick animation to show you why the sun is actually the best way of getting those numbers. And if you're in the sun for 15 minutes, Diane, you'll get about 10,000 units. So as I run this animation, you'll see that what happens is the melanin, the little bit of pigment, the bottom of the skin, begins to get released as you see more sun. And that little molecule that you saw at the very beginning, that was vitamin D being converted. So the sun rays hit us, converts the cholesterol in our body to vitamin D. That's why in the winter months, starting from right about now, our cholesterol numbers go up. Now, vitamin D was profoundly important to the history of medicine. Sanitariums, why did they evolve? They evolved because they knew that sunlight killed tuberculosis. Figure that all out. Now, what are the sources? Milk, reasonable source, but it's not the right kind of vitamin D.
Even the vitamin D supplemented milk is not the right kind necessarily.
Well, it's the vegetarian vitamin D2, and you want the animal version, which is what we need in our bodies. You can convert them. It's not that efficient. It's certainly a reasonable way of getting it, but it's probably not the best way of getting it. The sun, again, is the best way of getting it.
Obesity is associated with lower serum vitamin D levels since vitamin D is fat soluble. In obese individuals, much of the vitamin D that is ingested or produced in the skin is distributed in fat tissue rather than to the blood. It's important to remember that vitamin D is fat soluble and that it is absorbed into body fat, rendering it unusable by the body. This can be especially dangerous for those who are overweight.
People who are obese may not have enough vitamin D in their system. British researchers combined data from over 20 studies and found for every 10% increase in BMI, vitamin D levels went down 4%. They say the vitamin is stored in fatty tissue, and if there is an excessive amount of fat, it could prevent the vitamin from circulating in the bloodstream. Vitamin D deficiencies can cause bones to soften and weaken. Vitamin D is made after exposure to the sun. Experts say simple activities like walking the dog or going for a stroll in the park could boost levels of the vitamin and help people lose weight.
The sun often gets a bad rep as the culprit for diseases such as skin cancer, skin damage, and even cataracts. But today, we are going to let you in on a few secrets of the positive effects of the sun. First, did you know that sunlight boosts your levels of serotonin? Serotonin is a chemical in the brain that maintains mood balance. That means that sunlight can help the body to naturally produce serotonin and boost your mood. Did you know that sunlight helps your body to balance hormones that regulate sleep and wake cycles? Exposure to sunlight reduces the body's production of melatonin, helping you to stay awake throughout the day and drowsier during the night. Did you know that vitamin D is naturally produced by the body with the help from sunlight? That's why it's known as a sunshine vitamin. If you don't already enjoy daily sun exposure, try going outside for just a few minutes a day to reap the benefits. However, like everything else, sunlight should be enjoyed in moderation. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. Bye!
Point number 2. Dr. Zane Keim, author of the book Sunlight, concluded that sun exposure could be dangerous for those who have a high-fat diet. Point number 3. Foods that are high in saturated fatty acids include all meat, seafood, and dairy. The fatty foods associated with a higher risk of skin cancer are all meat, seafood, and dairy products. In other words, the risk factors are foods that affect blood cholesterol, as cholesterol is what the sun converts as the skin is exposed. Point number 4. Dr. Keim showed that there is a link between skin cancer and those who eat flesh foods and also dairy products. Point number 5. Vitamin D deficiency is associated with a significantly higher risk of heart failure. Heart disease is the #1 cause of death in America, due largely to what we eat. For example, foods high in saturated fats increase cholesterol and lead to hypertension. However, vitamin D has been shown to significantly lower risk of a heart attack. The research shows that deficiencies of vitamin D significantly raises the risk of heart failure. Vitamin D is one of the strongest ways to strengthen the immune system. This bit of information on vitamin D often takes many by surprise. Isn't that good news? How many of us knew that? So not only can getting sufficient sun exposure and therefore sufficient vitamin D and the lower risk for heart attacks, but it gives us a fighting chance against disease. Notice further how important this vitamin is while we watch the next video clip that shows, among many other things, how it strengthens our immune system.
You know that 100 million Americans have vitamin D deficiency. Think about it. 100 million of us, including children. And experts say it could be critical in American health. Dr. Mehmet Oz is here to change that deficiency one viewer at a time. Of course, he is the host of the Dr. Oz Show. It's so good to have you back with us.
Thank you much.
This vitamin is more and more implicated, as we said, in American health.
Well, vitamin D, if I had to pick one vitamin to push to everybody to think about again in their lives, it's vitamin D. It actually becomes a hormone in our body. And it's important not just for bone health, which is where most people think vitamin D is important, but it's important for high blood pressure. It's important for cancer, breast, colon, prostate. And you know what? If you worry about the swine flu today, take some vitamin D, because it's one of the best ways of enhancing your immune system.
I think we all can agree that since having a strong immune system is how we fight disease, we need a lot more sun in our lives. Point number 6. Enjoying sunshine can help to lower cholesterol. We looked at some of this earlier, but let's reiterate for emphasis. Sunshine converts cholesterol to vitamin D. So we find that vitamin D helps to lower cholesterol. Point number 7. Sunshine naturally helps to lower blood pressure also. Again, we see the heart health benefits of sunshine as it lowers cholesterol and blood pressure. Point number 8. Vitamin D has anti-cancer fighting properties. Of all the lifestyle diseases associated with lack of sun exposure and deficient vitamin D, cancer is potentially the most fascinating, as vitamin D has anti-cancer fighting properties. Let's take a look at more video clips that show just how important vitamin D is to the prevention of cancer.
Welcome back on this morning's Health Watch. Could the key to preventing cancer be just a vitamin away? Our own Dr. Jennifer Ashton is here with some new research on prevention and also some warnings about what not to take. Good morning.
Good morning.
There was a study out of the UK, incredibly promising. A daily dose of vitamin D can cut the cancer risk by 25%.
That's right. This is arguably, Maggie, the most important vitamin to all of our health in terms of preventing diseases and actually potentially treating some existing conditions. In my house, believe it or not, it is the only vitamin we take every day. And I think people better get used to it. It's not going away. Every day we hear more convincing research.
And is it enough just to take it in supplement form, or do you have to get it in foods or sunlight?
Actually, you know, 15 to 20 minutes of sunlight.
There's such a thing as too much of a good thing. Is that the same with vitamin D?
Absolutely. In very high doses, this can be toxic, so you should check with your doctor. They can do a blood test to evaluate your level, and people are finding now that actually you want a higher blood level. Between about 60 and 100 is the number. If you take vitamin D in supplementary form, adults, healthy adults, can probably take 2,000 to 3,000 units a day. Check with your doctor, though, because they might want to monitor your doses.
What are some signs that you may be deficient in vitamin D?
Well, there are a whole group of people who are at risk for low vitamin D levels. Older people, if you're pale-skinned, overweight, ironically dark-skinned, and those who live in northern latitudes can actually be deficient.
And now the new study linking vitamin D and cancer in a way we've never heard before. Doctors know that low levels of the vitamin can lead to a host of illnesses, but now research suggests that vitamin D might actually hold the key to fighting cancer. John McKenzie has a story.
The studies just keep coming, the evidence mounting. Low levels of vitamin D are now linked to so many illnesses, from breast, colon, and prostate cancers, type 1 diabetes and asthma, to multiple sclerosis and heart disease.
I even think of vitamin D as the fountain of youth, if you will, in that it allows us to age well.
At least that's the hope. And nowhere is the evidence more compelling than here in the laboratory.
So all the work here is on vitamin D?
Yes, we've got
Professor Joellen Welsh has spent the last 25 years studying the powerful effect of vitamin D on cells.
These are human breast cancer cells growing in the flask.
Taken from a woman who had breast cancer?
Yes.
Now watch what happens when you add a potent form of vitamin D. Within just 4 days, half those cancer cells are dead.
It looks like the cancer cells have basically shriveled up and died.
The longer they're treated with vitamin D, the more of an effect we see. What happens is that vitamin D enters the cells and it triggers this cell death process. It's similar to what we see when we treat cells with tamoxifen.
A drug used to treat breast cancer?
Yes.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. It's a very dramatic effect.
That was just the beginning. Researchers here then took human breast cancer cells and injected them into mice. Tumors quickly began to grow, but when the mice were treated with vitamin D, the tumors began to shrink. Look, this one was reduced to half its size. The one here disappeared entirely. Similar results have been seen on colon and prostate tumors in mice. The real test, however, remains. Will vitamin D work this way in people? Other lab work is revealing how vitamin D can actually improve the way cells function in the heart and in blood vessels.
And the number one killer is vascular disease, and vitamin D makes our arteries more healthy, basically, allows them to age well.
Preliminary, tantalizing research on a common nutrient with so much potential. For Good Morning America, John McKenzie, ABC News, Albany, New York.
Point number 9. Lower vitamin D levels are a risk factor for type 2 diabetes. In addition to all this, vitamin D also lowers blood sugar levels. So as you probably guessed, low vitamin D levels are a risk factor for type 2 diabetes. Sunshine aids in the production of insulin. So 1 hour of exercise outside in the sun can result in the production of nearly 5 units of insulin. A 2001 Finnish study shows that children who receive 2,000 IUs of vitamin D per day, beginning at 1 year and counting on, decrease their risk of developing type 1 diabetes later in life by 80%. Children who were vitamin D deficient had a 400% increase in risk of developing type 1 diabetes later on. A 2006 study in Progress in Biophysics and Molecular Biology reported that low vitamin D levels were found in people with type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease.
A study by Australian scientists has found a link between type 2 diabetes and vitamin D. The research found people who don't produce enough of the vitamin are at risk of becoming diabetic, and it's estimated between a third and a fifth of our population is deficient in vitamin D, which is produced when the skin is exposed to sunlight. Peter Ebling is from the University of Melbourne. He's also Professor of Medicine at Western Health. He was involved in the study and he joins me now. So Peter Ebling, if you are vitamin D deficient, how big is your risk of developing type 2 diabetes?
Well, we were actually able to look at this over the 5-year study where there were about 200 incident cases of diabetes. So for every 25 units that the vitamin D level went down, there was a 24% increase in the risk of getting diabetes, and that was independent of about 10 other risk factors that we looked at. So it's a significant increase in risk if you do have a low vitamin D level and other risk factors for getting diabetes.
When a nasty flu struck California's Atascadero State Hospital, Dr. John Cannell made an interesting discovery.
I know my patients were exposed to influenza, but none of them got sick.
Why? One reason could be that 30 of Cannell's patients had been given vitamin D on a regular basis. That got Cannell thinking more and more about the vitamin's benefits and safety.
Child's never gotten into a vitamin D cabinet and gotten poisoned. That's happened hundreds of thousands of times with Tylenol or aspirin or other things.
Medical writer Bill Sardi says if vitamin D were a drug, its benefits would make it the most popular ever.
Because we're talking about diabetes and hypertension and bone diseases, osteoporosis and arteriosclerosis and cancer and autoimmune disease, and the list goes on.
Scientists found that list is so long because vitamin D actually regulates cells, systems, and organs throughout the body.
It works by turning your genes on and off, very, very basic function. So that's a very important fact about vitamin D that distinguishes it from any other vitamin. It's a steroid hormone. It's in a class by itself.
A major question and area of controversy regarding vitamin D is sun exposure. So health investigators hit the trail looking for answers. Doctors have observed that where there's less sun, there's more cancer, flu, and even autism. For instance, there's more of these diseases in winter, which has less sunlight. And there's also more of these diseases the further you get away from the equator, because there's less sunlight the further you get away from there.
Even here in sunny California, very few people get enough sun to make sufficient vitamin D in their skin for the best of health.
Down in San Diego, you can make it year-round, but even then, in San Diego, in the wintertime, you have to go right out at solar noon. There's only about a 2 or 3 hour period where you're going to make any substantial amounts of vitamin D.
But wait a minute, won't this possibly lead to skin cancer? Most sunscreen companies provide products that block the ultraviolet B, or UVB, from the sun. Those are the very rays you need to produce vitamin D in the skin.
Now they admit the UVA rays that the sunblock lotions allow to get in are the ones causing the cancer. So they let the one that causes skin cancer in, and they block the one that prevents it.
Statistics show skin cancer rates and deaths have actually risen since the sunscreen campaigns began 30 years ago. Cannell recommends keeping your time in the sun moderate. 15 minutes in a bathing suit during summer is plenty. You don't want to age your skin or cause damage from a sunburn. Not everyone agrees. The American Academy of Dermatology website finds it appalling that anyone in good conscience could make the claim that intentional sun exposure for any length of time is beneficial. Then there's the issue of darker skin, which naturally screens out more of the UVB rays that make vitamin D. Their blood levels of D are about half that of lighter skinned people, making a connection with the diseases that shorten their lives.
Heart disease and hypertension and stroke and cancer are the same diseases that have been associated with vitamin D deficiencies.
So it may not be surprising that vitamin D deficiency affects as much as 3/4 of the populace, especially as winter takes its toll on vitamin D levels. That depletion could be remedied and possibly reduce the need for flu shots.
Vitamin D activates your immune system, causes something to be formed called little peptides that kill bacteria and viruses without antibiotic resistance, without side effects. We can use it in very young infants and pregnant moms.
And not only help fight osteoporosis, but strengthen teeth as well.
Instead of using fluoride to harden our teeth so there's no soft spots where the acids can then eat into our teeth and cause dental decay. We can use vitamin D. It's more appropriate, it's more natural.
And D appears to boost athletic performance.
There's just clear evidence, especially in the German literature, of choice reaction time, balance, muscle strength, endurance, all improve with vitamin D.
Which may explain why senior citizens on vitamin D are less likely to fall and hurt themselves. And cancer? Sardi says in a new book that a major reason not to be so fearful about the disease is vitamin D. A key U.S. study in June found it provided a 60% reduction in cancers.
Canadian Cancer Society immediately told all of their citizens, begin supplementing with at least 1,000 units of vitamin D. American Cancer Society, mum's the word.
In fact, here is video of how vitamin D helps zap cancer cells, like the one to the right of the arrow. But 2 weeks ago, the National Cancer Institute released a study indicating vitamin D doesn't do much against cancer deaths. NCI normally prefers the type of study done in June, but Cannell says this new study fits their bias against vitamin D. Even at that, the new study did show the vitamin's effect on the number 2 cancer killer.
The people with the highest levels had 4 times less colon cancer than the people with the lowest levels. I think that's pretty important.
So what's the best way for you to get the vitamin D you need? Not from food. Even fortified milk provides so little that it's trivial. Taking supplements is a far more predictable source than sunbathing, and the only source in winter for millions. Experts suggest the best daily intake is at least 2,000 units for most kids and 4,000 for most adults. Yet the government recommends only 200 to 600 units depending on your age.
Just the whole thing, when you think about it, is just patently absurd. And the government's been recommending this now for 10 years, and they refuse to change they refuse to even look at the science.
Cannell says he and his wife have taken as much as several 100,000 units for a few days when fighting off colds or flu. His usual daily dose is 5,000 units, a dozen times what the government recommends for him. He finds it a religious connection.
Here, the Lord is saying that there's a system that makes this much vitamin D this quickly, thousands of units a day from sun exposure. And here's a government over here saying you only need a couple of 100 units a day. So you can sort of ask yourself, who do you want to believe, God or the government?
Galen Tethrow, CBN News.
The sun, with all those planets revolving around it and dependent on it, can still ripen a bunch of grapes as if it had nothing else in the universe to do. Galileo. Thank you for attending this week's session on Enjoying Sunshine. And until next week, always remember, your health is your choice.